I'm just posting my link.
Hello, everybody. We're live.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
So, let's introduce who we've got here today and what we're going to be talking about. So, I'm Salford Sal. I stream on Twitch. I've been streaming since 2014 and I've been playing Dwarf Fortress about that long. I started streaming Dwarf Fortress in, I think, about 2017, and I've got tens of thousands of hours of Dwarf Fortress play. And Zesty, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Zest. I stream at BlueZestTV. I've been playing Dwarf Fortress for years and years and years. But I've been streaming it for about 5 or 6, and I actually owe a lot to Dwarf Fortress because that's how I got my start streaming, because I really like teaching the game, and it's fun to help people get into this fantastic game. And if you have anybody who wants to get into the game, you can actually find me at 7 p.m. Central on Sundays with Dwarf Fortress every Sunday.
Excellent.
And on Thursdays now recently.
And Elana, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm ElanaOrama. I call myself a RimWorld Plus streamer because I play a lot of Hack and RimWorld. And I started RimWorld in 2018, and I'd always heard about Dwarf Fortress. And so when the team decided to bring it to Steam, I was absolutely ecstatic to give it a try. So I'm a very new Dwarf Fortress player, but I'm already really, really getting into it. I'm very excited to be here today.
Yeah, I've been watching some of your streams. It's really fun watching a new player. It's surprising, as an experienced player, when I watch a new player, I say maybe 1 in 5 times I learn something that the new player knows that I didn't. It's bizarre.
I've run into the same thing.
Yeah. So today we are going to be discussing everything about embarking, how to choose a place on the world map, and to know what to expect when you get there. And we're going to be looking at what to take when you're embarking, which you'll probably tweak. It's probably advisable to tweak depending on where you're going. I've got a world ready to look at. But I tell you what, while that loads, I'll just start off by going through some settings. So you guys, so Zesty and Elana, let me know what you think about these settings, and if there's anything that you would agree or disagree, feel free to chime in. So when I'm setting up a new game, I go to settings and I make sure that I turn down my population cap first, because I don't want to be flooded with migrants right at the start. I kind of put a limit on my vacancies. So at the moment I'm limiting my vacancies for the first year or two to a population cap of 30 and a strict population cap of 40.
I totally agree with that. Limiting the population is, from what I understand it, and as you probably already know, is directly tied to difficulty in the game. A lot of events don't occur until you're at a certain population level, so setting the population cap low can really help you get used to the basics before you start suddenly getting launched into the harder stuff.
Yeah, it can help to delay some of the problems that you're going to face.
When I think when you're first starting out with a new fort, having it grow too rapidly, you just end up worrying too much about building out the resources for all the additional migrants.
Yeah.
That I've had trouble getting into some of the other aspects of the game because I'm focused on just those basic needs.
And the other thing that I change is the game frames per second cap, because I like to slow it down, especially at the start. I limit my game frames per second cap to 30. So, I mean, that's less than a third of the standard game speed. So that controls how fast your dwarves move. And it slows them down to about a third of the speed.
That's a good idea if you're looking for a a nice, because the game, of course, runs at that speed, so it's helpful to slow it down to sort of help control. One of the things I like to say to people is definitely don't panic, and having it be nice and slow and coming at you at a nice even pace can definitely help with that panic.
Yeah. And I think pause is your friend.
Definitely.
And on that note, another setting that's worth changing is pause after loading. Make sure that pause after loading is set to yes.
I think
Sounds
that
good to
one
me.
is by default.
Okay. Can I just check with chat that audio's okay? Is everybody hearing everything okay in chat? I know Drake is just saying he's got zero sound. Other people are saying it's okay for them. Audio's good? Yep, everybody's saying it's okay. Right, good. So, setting up a new world. Let's just look at the settings for a new world. And so let's start with the flavor text. So, welcome to Dwarf Fortress. Prepare to guide your stout chargers to fortune in a world fraught with many perils. You'll begin by creating your world and watching the region's history unfold. Once this process is complete, you can prepare a group and send them out to dig wealth deep into the mountains. As you dig deeper and more citizens take up residence in your outpost, your doings will attract attention, both wanted and unwanted. Deal with challenges as they arrive, and you might one day find that your humble settlement has grown to become a mountain home, the centre of your civilization. Yeah, Dwarf Fortress flavor text is best text, says chat. And we've got a raid coming in from Daztastic.
Hello, Daz. Thank you for the
Welcome
raid.
in, Raiders.
So,
Fantastic.
Yeah, hello, Daztastic, and welcome, Raiders. So, looking at the world settings for creating a new world, I think something to consider is, as a new player, is your computer and how strong your CPU is. Dwarf Fortress can be quite CPU intensive, and I think by looking at the world map size can really help with having a fortress that is easier for your CPU to manage. For most people, I would recommend the medium setting. What do you usually go for, Zesty? Do you usually go medium world?
I actually, I know medium is the default, but I tend to bump mine down to small just to make it load faster. Now that's carrying over from the non-Steam version.
Yeah.
And I know the Steam version actually loads a lot faster as far as I've been able to tell.
Yeah.
I like to do small just to make it load faster, and also you don't really need all that space, but medium is still good if you want a nice big world to play around in and get lots of stories in.
Yeah. I think with medium you get a few more options on locations to embark as well.
Definitely. That's, yeah.
Yeah. Haunted Putty likes small as well. For history length, what do you usually go for, Zesty?
I usually keep most things at default for myself.
Yeah.
Same, that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. For new players who are confused at what these all mean, I sort of think of it as like a stew pot. The world map is sort of the size of the stew you want to make. The history length is how long you cook it and allow those flavors to mix together. And then your civilizations are like your various vegetables and potatoes and meats that you're putting in there, as well as this number of sites, which is like spices, and the beasts, which are like the hot peppers and stuff like that.
That's such a good analogy.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And it's all about what kind of world or flavor you kind of want to create. And the longer... Sorry, you
Sorry,
can.
I wonder then if for new players, maybe it would be better to change some of these to a lower setting to kind of simplify the world and make it a little bit more straightforward.
I think for a history length, I've been advising new players to go for a longer history.
Really?
Yeah, and that's so that there's less of a chance of becoming the mountain home early.
It also cuts down on the longer you go, the more the beasts, because at the very first couple of years, the world is infested with gigantic titanic mythological creatures.
Yeah.
And if you let it cook longer, more of them get killed and die off due to heroes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So the longer your history length, the more civilizations you'll have in the world. Some of these civilizations might have grown quite large, which is why you're less likely to become a mountain home early. Because you can then choose a dwarven civilization to belong to that is really well established and has a lot of population. Having a king or a queen in your fortress is a pain in the backside.
Definitely.
It's
That's what
something.
it sounds like.
Yeah, something that's good to avoid, or at least delay for a while. So if you get to year 3 and the king arrives, oh my god, it's a nightmare.
I highly recommend if you're a new player and suddenly you get a note that a queen has arrived, that you probably want to restart or prepare yourself for fun, because they require a lot.
They're very
Sure.
demanding.
Demanding
Indeed.
royals, yeah.
Absolutely. And Napsa, thank you so much for the raid. Welcome on in. So a short history length, as Zesty says, is going to have the world will be infested with the mega beasts, the dragons, the rocks, all of those mythical creatures which can be a bit difficult to deal with as a beginner. But the longer the history, the more you'll have problems with corrupted civilizations, things like necromancers and werebeasts and vampires, people who've been cursed by the gods. Their curses will start to spread throughout the civilizations. So it is a balance, but
Definitely.
I think on that balance, like I said, I've been advising new players to go for a longer history length, and I would advise at least 250 years.
And that number sounds good to me too.
Yeah. So
See, that's amazing information. Every single fort I've done so far, I've just done the standard settings, 100 years. And it makes absolute sense that you would want to try to have the world a bit more stabilized
yeah,
for a newer player's fort.
number of civilizations, that's how many dwarven civilizations you've got, how many elven civilizations, how many humans. So very low you might only get 3 dwarven civilizations. At very high you might get 7 or 8. And maximum number of sites is how many towns and cities each of those civilizations will have. Now, if you've got problems with your computer not being very strong, turning these 2 down will help, because then there'll just be less people in the world.
And less calculations for the game
Yeah.
to figure out.
And number of beasts, I found medium is excuse me, medium is quite good for a beginner. They're still fairly rare at medium, and they'll end up in your fortress eventually anyway.
Sure.
Natural savagery. So for natural savagery, that is how wild the world is. For an example, in a neutral savage world, you're in an area that is of neutral savagery, you might get crocodiles. If you're in a warm swamp, you might get You might get wolves if you're in a cold forest. But if you're in an area of high savagery, you might get aggressive crocodile men in a warm swamp, and you might get aggressive wolf men in a cold forest. And you'll find that things like giant birds in particular they get very upset when you chop down trees.
And there's nothing like having a giant key coming in and pecking your dwarf's eyes out at an inopportune time.
Indeed. So I would suggest that new players turn down natural savagery, at least to low. It doesn't affect the balance of the whole world. It just affects how many areas of the world have high savagery. Giant keys are the worst indeed, says Chap.
It will also give you more places to choose from.
Yeah, indeed. And then mineral occurrence, I would suggest leave it as everywhere. It gives you more places to choose from.
That definitely is nice. There's turning it down will definitely force you to rely on trade more, and having everything everywhere kind of lets you build the fort to its maximum potential.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can see how down the road the starting world map would create some fun challenges for sure.
So I think these are the settings that I would advise for a new player. And then as you become more experienced and you start tinkering around, if you want the challenge of a very savage world, if you know that you want to play savage fortresses and you turn up natural savagery to very high, it means that there'll be more places on the world map you can choose that have that high savagery that you might be looking for. And same with mineral occurrence. If you want to make it a tough playthrough where you're going to have to trade more and there's not going to be much iron or you're not going to have the ability to make many metal goods, then you can turn mineral occurrence down to very rare. Some people like to start with a minimum history length of 5 years and start off with the OG generation of dwarfs and build up society from there. So all of these, there are no right or wrong answers about these. It's just helpful to know how these things affect your world. And
definitely. I was actually going to say that myself as well.
Yeah.
With Dwarf Fortress, there really is no winning. You kind of set your own goals, and it's analogy I like to use is it's kind of like a Bob Ross painting. It's your world, make it how you want it to be, and sometimes there's lots of little happy accidents that make your painting more interesting.
Indeed. Okay, well, rather than create a world, I've got a world ready to go that we can have a look at. While that world's loading, how about we have a little story time, a Dwarf Fortress story time? Zesty, you've brought a story along for us.
Yeah. I took a look into the Legends mode, and I created a world for this story time, a little bit spicier than most worlds. I tend to like to do this in my Fortress Embarks as well, because it makes the Embarks a little bit more interesting. So what I did is I went into the detailed mode of world creation, and I turned the evil and good biomes up to very high. For those of you who are more familiar with the game, I set the small subregions and the large subregions to 200 desired, and the medium ones to 60. And that created a world with just this rather infectious-looking discoloration across it of both joyous wilds and terrifyingly evil necromantic pits of death and despair. It also usually tends to discern the ocean's evil, which is really funny if you embark on the ocean, because I embarked on an ocean once on a different fort. It's a little side tangent, and a herd of ogres ran into the ocean surf and immediately turned into husks, which then started eating each other.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So In this mode, I also used the Kobold mod. This is mostly an aesthetic mod. You can find this in the Steam Workshop, as well as a bunch of other really interesting mods. I highly recommend, once you've gotten familiar with the game, giving that a look, because you can really do a lot of fun stuff with the game to expand your playing of it. So after I set up the world, looking through the historic sites, I found a rather very, very long history of a kobold fort called Shackbrash. It started out in year 1, before really most of the world even got on its feet. This fort was ready to go, filled up with, I assume, 1-year-old kobolds for some reason. Before anything else could even happen, they were immediately beset by the Hag of Twilight, Amu Dust Crypts, who, after several great battles...
A what?
A Hag of Twilight. I'm not exactly... I clicked on her name, and it shows that she has a very long and storied history, but I'm unsure what a Hag of Twilight is. If there's anybody in the chat who knows who would like to explain.
I'm guessing a night troll.
Okay.
It says she's the only one of her kind, a large, scaly humanoid with 3 short horns, and it moves with unseen jerking motions. Its black scales are round and set far apart. So it's sort of like a night beast. Yeah, it looks like. And you get a lot of those when you embark in a world at the very start of the world. Lots of horrific beasts like that.
Sorry to interrupt. I was like,
no, that's perfect. It makes it fun to explain stuff. I also have the Legends mode up right here, so if you want me to explain anything, I can look at it. After things settled down and the beast was driven off, it appeared that most of the kobolds and the Hag of Twilight herself were unscathed. They were beset by rabid dingoes, terrible brooding freaks, and after a couple of years, Anu Dust Crypts came back and started hassling them again, but no one was injured for some reason. I didn't see any deaths. Despite all of these horrors, and I assume since they most likely were in an evil biome, probably blood and pus rain, which happens in evil biomes, or fogs that turn you inside out, like from The Simpsons. A lot of the kobolds randomly started becoming poets and philosophers and biologists and scientists, and they started writing several books. The first book ever written was actually called Destroyers of the Fleshy Skunk, and some were simply titled just Gales. Sort of following along with the general mindset of this wonderful world that these kobolds were living in. And I assume that's because they probably were all 1-year-old, so they started the fort as babies. I'm not sure how the world generation works, and maybe since they didn't have any skills, they became scholars, but I'd have to know about the embark rules for that. So over the course of the next about 50 years, there were kidnappings, horrors of more monsters, night beasts, the return of this Hag of Twilight. They still managed to keep getting migrants who would show up eager to press their wares and their crafts. But luckily, this time they were more sensible. Like they started getting miners and crafters and metal crafters and other things like that. Something a lot more sensible for your average fortress, kobold or dwarven. The most interesting artifact of note I noticed was a dagger called Meyerwilt, which for some reason, I don't understand why, was stolen a total of 11 times over the next 50 years.
What?
I don't know how that's possible. I don't know if they captured it back. It didn't say. It just kept saying it was stolen by the kobold, stolen by the kobold, stolen by... So I'm assuming it was just passed between kobolds. They just go into each other's rooms and steal it. And it wound up making the rounds.
That's amazing.
After relative peace, despite more kidnappings, books of countless strange names, I started to notice a lot of criminal actions by goblins in the fort. They would see, like, the goblin... where's the name? Goblin Nako Dreadful Swamps, or the goblin Smuntsu Echoed Terror would show up, and they'd start corrupting kobolds to make agents in the fort. To what seemed like almost no purpose, until eventually In the year 117, so full 116 years later, I've never had a fort go that long. It seemed to culminate in a goblin invasion by a company called the Doom of Companies, who razed every major location in the fort: the libraries, the hospitals, and most tragically of all, the bars.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Yeah. And then at this point, they seem to take over the fort. So instead of becoming a kobold fort, it became a sinister goblin fort. But despite being taken over, it still kept getting kobold and goblin migrants showing up to live here. So they seem to establish some kind of peace or accord, despite having their new masters of the goblins.
So it was basically a coup of some sort.
That's what
Yeah.
it sounds like.
That's what I assumed from all of the agents, that maybe they were preparing for some kind of coup. It was very strange.
That's incredible.
From the sense of the chat, kobolds have no sense of property.
Yeah. Shiny.
Sounds about right. Hold on, lost my place. For the next several years, they kept getting in disputes with various local entities over water rights, and another one was stuff I've never really seen in my own fort, but only in Legends mode, I believe this can occur. Like water rights, grazing rights, stuff like that. Little political hoo-has that going on.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, in the Legends mode, for some reason I kept seeing that. I can send you a screenshot if you'd like.
Yeah,
And
sure. I'll bring it up on screen so chat can see it.
Sure. Let me just do a print screen.
I might have a little bit of a dumb question, but that's what I'm
Sure.
here for, right?
No, perfect.
So Legends mode, how would you describe that to the new players in the community? Because to me that just sounds like it's absolutely epic, but what parts of the story are attributed to the Legends mode or just to happenstance?
So this is really interesting. So the world you're making in the game isn't just for your fort. You actually inhabit a very small square of this, as you can see on the screen right now, gigantic world. And it's not just your fort that's occurring there. There's an entire randomly generated universe that's created for each save in almost a horrific fashion, because there are events you will never see that are worthy of books. Like, you can go in and get ideas for books from Legends mode. It's fantastic. As someone from the chat said, great name, by the way, Legends mode is like the Wikipedia for your game world, and that's a
Yeah.
pretty good. And I like that.
That's incredible. Okay, that sounds really cool. Very good.
Yeah, you can spend endless hours in Legends mode looking at just various events that have happened in your world.
So it does just provide more insight into what's going on in the rest of the world rather than just focusing in on your single fort.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the big differences between a game like RimWorld and Dwarf Fortress, is that Dwarf Fortress, the game isn't really about you. You join a world simulation, and the history of the world, all of the things that are going on, aren't really concerned about whether or not you exist. It will carry on happening without you. Oh, let me just bring this up from Zesty so that chat can see it. Here we go. So this is what Zesty's seen. So in the mid-autumn of 159, the egg of Zenith
It's on the screen.
of Shackbrash and the tame beginning of Devil Shack became embroiled in a dispute over grazing rights. I have never seen that. So,
Yeah, I don't know if it's just a Legend exclusive or
I mean,
what.
yeah, I mean, I've never seen it in Legends either. And I've done a lot of Legends diving. But yeah, I've never seen a dispute over grazing rights. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and there was other stuff too, like over water rights for some reason. It would create
Ah.
these little clashes between companies.
But yeah, anyway, sorry to interrupt your story, but
No,
yeah,
that's okay.
Zesty, do you want to continue?
Um, I seem to have misplaced my second page. I know that I don't have my second page here for some reason, but I do have the legends up. And looking through it again, I do see that the fort managed to survive up until the world generation that I made was year 500. So Shackbrash is a very long history, 500 years of history that I'm actually going to keep combing through, and maybe I'll um, be able to revise some of my notes and bring you more. But that's just a
Yeah,
little
cool.
expert from it.
So, well, thank you for the story. That's quite fascinating that they can get embroiled over disputes. Not something I've seen before.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had no idea that was possible. That's
Indeed.
incredible.
So one thing that I will often do is once I've got my fortress established in a world, I will make a copy save of my world, and then I'll retire the copy fortress. I will retire, so that I can then go and have a dig around in Legends and see the stories of the migrants who arrive there, the books that we find, the artifacts that we find, and the visitors. If you get a visitor to your fortress, they've had a whole life before they've got to you. And it can be really interesting finding out the history and stories behind these things.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about it. It's also
Yeah.
like putting your fort on autopilot, so you could create a nice basis for a story and then
Yeah.
retire it. And I was so excited. I've been playing for so long that you weren't used to be able to retire your forts, and I was so excited when Toady put in the ability for you to retire your fort and not leave it to ruin.
Yeah.
It was so cool to be able to do that, and then make another fort in the same world and interact with it, or visit your fort as an adventure and walk around in it as if you're a person in this world. It was just awesome.
Yeah. Or I had a fort in a world where I retired the fort so that the AI would run it for me. And then I took an adventure party because we kept on getting books that had all been written in the same location. And I figured that there must be an amazing library in this place. So I took an adventure party and we went out and found the library, which turned out it was a tiny, tiny little room that had hundreds of people crammed in it. And there was just books all over the floor because they didn't have enough bookcases. And
That's amazing.
and the people were so cramped. There must have been like 200 it was a dwarven fortress, but it, like I say, just this library place.
Hell of a book club.
Yeah, huge book club. It was like a university that somebody had set up in a garden shed. There was about 200 dwarves and elves and goblins, all scholars, all trying to fit in this tiny little room. And they kept on having fights breaking out. There were so many murders going on because they couldn't all fit in the room.
That's one way to make more space for everyone.
So
It was just academic discussion.
yeah.
Heated debate.
So going back to embarking, we are going to skip the tutorial because the tutorial will choose a place for you, and we want to choose a place of our own design. So but do be aware of this text. You're on your own. If this is your first time playing, and I would say maybe your first couple of 100 times playing, please heed the embark warnings about aquifers, salt water, and other hazards. Some locations are challenging even for experienced players. I think, yeah, we've all
Yep.
died within the first week, and it will be a very short game indeed if you don't know how to deal with them. After your embark, help is available by pressing the help button in the top right corner, including all of the tutorials. So,
And
yeah.
tutorials are never something to be ashamed of, but
No.
I know some folks like to go hardcore with these. And as a player of how many years, streaming it for at least 6, I've still discovered things that I might not have ever even known or seen before. Like, even as you all heard, we found out about the water rights thing today, even
Yeah.
all of us. Or the type of night beast. Like, you'll see things you've never even seen before in your 600th player versus
Yeah.
your first play.
Okay, so the first thing I do when I have the world generated, I have a look to see what poles I've got so that I know the temperatures of the map. We've got a North Pole, we can tell because there's ice and snowy areas. And if you have a look at the flavor text up here, it tells us that the temperature is freezing underneath where my mouse is now. So we've got a North Pole. Do we have a South Pole?
I definitely see the appeal of having such a big world. It is nice to have all this space to look at.
A lot of options for sure.
We don't have a South Pole. That means that the equator is in the south. So the temperature gradient will go from the cold in the north to scorching in the south. And dwarfs don't have a problem with heat, but there is a slight problem with cold in that your water will freeze. And the further towards a pole you are, the more frequently your any water that you have, any rivers, any brooks, any oceans you have will freeze. So for a new player, I would recommend going for at least temperate and as warm as possible. So
I agree with that as well. Fresh water can really be a lifeline if you either forget to make booze or you run out of food or ingredients to make booze, and suddenly your dwarves are thirsty. They can have that water as a buffer to keep them alive.
Oh, I'll just point out, this is a 500-year-old world that I'm looking at here, which is why there's quite so many necromancer towers. It's not guaranteed, but the longer your history, the more likely you are to have necromancer towers everywhere.
As someone in the chat just said, hot biomes do evaporate standing water, but brooks and rivers should still be reliable.
Indeed. Now,
I think one of the biggest issues I've run into as a new player has definitely been with regards to water in the starting map. My second fort had a light aquifer that I absolutely was not ready to handle. And now I'm playing in a fort that doesn't have any water. So it's very interesting to be learning this now. I'm like, oh, already taking notes.
Yeah, the two extremes. Aquifers used to be really horrific. Now light aquifers are much more manageable.
Yeah, I plan to go back to that fort when I have a little bit more of the mechanics for water management down. But then now with not having any water to manage, it's kind of like I need to find some middle ground.
Yep. I totally understand, yeah.
So what I would suggest is, well, first thing to do is to choose your origin civilization. You've kind of got to do that first before you set your embark location. When you're choosing your origin, what I look for is the dwarven population that has the largest existing population and the largest number of sites. So this one here has got a population of 500 and sites of 12. They are nearly extinct. So there's a very strong chance that if we joined the Urn of Singing, that we'd end up having the monarch living in our fortress like very quickly. Let's have a look at these. These guys have got 6,800. So, and you can see where they're located on the map. You see how many sites they've got. 6,800 dwarfs. You've got a much better chance of lasting several years before you end up as the mountain home.
Definitely. And the king is named Urosh Bus Sieges, so you know he's not going to die in any wars.
Exactly.
The elevated saber has 9,500, 46 sites. The town of flyers, now they're a bit smaller, 1,625 sites. They're in trouble. They're not on the verge of extinction, but they're in trouble. It'd be quite easy to build a site that was the richest site, I would imagine, and get the monarch moving to your fortress. And then the Steel of Spots, 3,532 sites. So I think for this map, we've got two obvious choices. We've got the Hermetic Pillar with 6,800 people up in the north here. And number of sites, 70. And then the Elevated Sabre with the 9,546 sites down in the south. It's choosing who to go with. If you've got two large dwarven, or if you've got more than one large dwarven civilization to choose from, I would suggest that you choose one that is on the largest continent if there's more than one large continent. I'm just looking at this place. It looks like it's almost all connected, actually.
Nice. That is definitely something I try to go for too. Not being connected to a bunch of civs makes the game a little more dull. But it alternatively, I guess, can be more peaceful if you're a new player. So either or.
Yeah, so...
Does it matter that there's a significant difference in the number of sites between these two factions? Or civilizations?
The population is, I think, more important than the number of sites. Sure. I would go for the larger population rather than the larger number of sites. It kind of gives you an indication of how well that civilization's doing. And if they're concentrated on a smaller number of sites, then those sites are going to be richer and more densely populated. So you're, again, less likely to become the mountain home quickly. But at these sorts of numbers, you're safe either way. When you're down in the sort of like less than 1,000 and a handful of sites, or even in the small number of thousands, those guys are okay at 3,500. But yeah, and this is not critical. It's just delaying how long it's going to take for the monarch to move to your fortress. So yeah, I think with this one I would probably go for the Elevated Sabre. But to be honest, if the Hermetic Pillar had a name that I really liked, I would take a fancy name over the Elevated Sabre.
Me too.
Sure.
But you might also fancy taking on something like the Urn of Singing with its 550 dwarves. And
it's definitely a risk, yeah.
Yeah. But you might try to revive the civilization, restore them to their former glory.
Like a challenge.
Yeah,
run.
Absolutely. In a playthrough I've got going at the moment, I'm coaching a new player called Honeyplay, and we had a look at the dwarfs she had available, and she's got a dwarven civilization that's got one dwarf left.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah. And, well, as you can imagine, he's the king.
Right.
And
how interesting.
Yeah, he's got 0 sites to call his own. So I assume that king is a refugee somewhere. So that I was looking at that and go, oh, I want to play that myself.
Right, me too. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Sounds so intriguing.
I mean, you get no merchants. You'd only get migrants for the first 2 waves. You wouldn't get any migrants beyond that because there's nobody to migrate to your fortress. I am curious about this king. of the Urn of Singing. The king is Kulududrukis. That is not a dwarven name.
I'll write that down. We should check that out in Legends, maybe.
We should. We really should. In fact, should we, before we go too far into this, because I'll end up generating a game, you got that written down?
Yep, there's the name.
Let's skip out and go to Legends mode. Okay, start new game in existing world. Legendary planet.
That's one of the joys of this game. There's so many little things to keep your attention in it.
Indeed. Yeah.
And so much story to be told.
By the way,
Endless
for anyone
replayability.
Exactly, yeah. For anyone watching, what we're showing you isn't like the only way to succeed. We're kind of trying to show you the most comfortable way to start the game, and you don't have to worry about memorizing all of this because we're trying to guide you into the most comfortable way to play, but it's okay to be a little uncomfortable. We're just trying to help you if that helps you learn.
Indeed.
It's easy to learn when you're comfortable and don't have your dwarves on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something to be said about the joy of the challenge, but there's also something to be said about how overwhelming a deep game like this can be if you go into too challenging of situations too early on.
Mm-hmm. And it's not a all or nothing. Like there's having a low pop isn't suddenly super difficult. It's just little things here and there that add up.
What was the name of that character again?
I wrote it in our little group chat. Chulu Duru. So Chulu.
Hul. Oh.
A kobold dark ghoul, and this is unmodded.
Yeah.
Wow.
A kobold dark ghoul. Well, here's more story time. Took over this fort, this civilization of dwarves.
Yeah. So he started off. He was born in the year 56. He's made some friends, become an animal dissector. He's made some lovers, broke up with them, got married.
He married another kobold dark ghoul.
I'm guessing that at this point in time, they were probably not dark ghouls. That's probably happened later on. Oh, he's died of old age in the year 210.
Oh, there it is.
But then he's been brought back from the dead by a dwarf necromancer, Lorbam Sealingjord, and become a dark ghoul in the grieving gloom.
Seems like this guy.
That's a tower.
The necromancer must have risen this little kobold hamlet or whatever.
And then he's become the king of the Urn of Singing.
He just suddenly became it?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's
9
random.
years later. That's a bit of a jump.
That's random. So what happens? Well, I'm just curious, actually. Then, he got married again, and then he's got divorced. They've then got involved in an awful lot of battle axe throwing competitions and mace throwing competitions, where he's been the victor many, many times.
Wow.
And we know he's still alive now. I'm curious. Do we know how he became the king? Let's find out.
Is that the name of the civilization, or is that a different civilization? Maybe he became a king multiple times.
The Urn of Singing. What year did he become king? It was 224. What happened in the year 224 in the Urn of Singing? I mean, the previous king must have died. Or the previous monarch.
We do have a quick question in the chat that I just want to draw to your attention. It says, migrants only come from your own civilization. Is that the case?
That's the case.
Interesting. So then beyond there, you would have to what? They would have to have dwarven children, right?
Yeah.
To grow the fort.
Yeah, yeah. Let's have
and that
a
takes years.
Yeah, a long time.
I don't think I've ever really had a fort last many years. I tend to get bored.
And then go to a new one.
A new project.
Okay, so what's happened here then?
It's a wacky civilization. They're all dark ghouls and zombies.
The Ring of Verse defeated the snarling pillars of the Earl of Singing and took over this place, the new government. In the spring of 215, the Rings of Verse defeated some other place, took over a new government. A dwarf became a count. Gobalt Darkghoul became a diplomat. A giant dingo became an enemy of the Earl of Singing. The giant wolf became an enemy, so they must have been attacked. Then a troll has become an enemy, so they'll have been attacked by that troll too. A dwarf's started embezzling. And then someone's become... So in the year 24, we've got a zombie dwarf becomes a baroness. A kobold becomes a baron. A kobold becomes a countess.
This fort seems like a nice place.
Yeah.
Party house. Not that I want to build a summer home here. But...
Yeah, it seems... And look at this. In the year 243, the freak consort of the night, a stray tempest became an enemy. So, yeah, I guess it doesn't look like the site was attacked, but it does look as though a bunch of people from the site must have died for all of these guys to be... Yeah,
who raised that kobold? Was there a chance that he was part of the fort and his creations kind of just
took it
over?
Maybe.
Lobrum Ceiling Jaw, I see there.
Let's have a look.
Did he become part of the fort? Or
around... What was the
Better Kobold was a book he wrote. They're better zombies.
Let's see where he was settled in the run-up to the year 224. Oh, this is where he's brought back a whole bunch of people from the dead in the grieving gloom. In Pursuit of the Grieving Gloom was authored by him. Brought a whole bunch of people back from the dead. And a whole bunch more from the dead.
So it's just random? Huh. Well, there's got to be some strange story in here somewhere.
Yeah. I think we would have to go dig in an awful lot to see, like, find the individual characters. Like, if we found the original king and then found out how that king died, that would probably tell us what's going on. What's the which site is he king at again?
So
The Urn of Singing.
Cinderlesh in the chat said, "Well, he did create a kobold who became king. I say his qualifications to write about better kobolds cannot be denied."
Yeah, indeed. Well, I'm going to dig into this, but I think for the moment, because we could risk spending the whole stream just looking at this.
I look forward to your future story time about this.
Yeah. Let's get back to the embark, because that's what we came to talk to people about.
And it would be fun to play in this world as that civilization, because I assume the king would show up, and then you'd have a king who's a zombie kobold. How interesting.
Yeah. So yes, that's why you might choose a civilization that isn't the ideal civilization, because they're interesting. But as a new player, I would recommend going for one with a high population and a high number of sites. And then find embark location. So for me, I go for a 4x4 embark. I have found that to be a good balance between having lots of things on your map and having the edges of your map, of your playable area, be a little bit far away from the center of your fort. Like, the smaller you make this number, the harder it is, because the enemy will arrive closer to your front door. If that makes
And
sense.
it's less space to find gems and
Yeah.
interesting stuff underground that you might need.
But a very large embark, like that can go up to 16. If much larger than this, and you start running it into FPS problems fairly early on.
FPS death is one of the biggest killer of
Yeah.
forts. Most of all of my
Sure.
forts have died with that.
Yeah. So 4x4, the default's quite a good one, I think. You're going to want a fluxstone layer so that you can make steel. And unless you want to play with aquifers, I would say turn off light aquifers. Turn off... Well, you're not switching them off. You're looking for a site that doesn't have a light or a heavy. You want some sort of river there. A river or a brook or something. Some sort of fresh water. And then for soil, you want... so this is less than or equal to deep. This gives it the maximum options. So we're saying anything, any soil at all, just find us something that's... Don't rule anything out based on its depth of soil.
And soil is very useful for new
It
players
is,
because soil
yeah.
can be dug very quickly. It doesn't leave stone behind, so you can set up shop in soil. The only drawbacks of soil is that you can't engrave it or make it look nice for your dwarves.
Indeed.
But for a new player, that doesn't really matter because that's later in the game that you need to worry about having nice rooms and stuff.
I would say find an embark that has iron and an embark that has silver. Silver's really good for your heavy weapons, your crushing weapons like maces and hammers. Steel is best for armor and pokey weapons, pokey and slashing weapons like spears and swords and axes and things. And that's how I'd set up my search criteria. So, fluxstone, no aquifers, a river, anything up to deep soil, iron and silver. And then we press begin and it'll search the map looking for a location that matches those criteria. So we can see it running around the map now. Anywhere where you can't embark, it just leaves blank. So we can't embark on the mountains, they're impassable. And we can't embark where somebody else is already embarked.
And thankfully, since we, in the settings, set the mineral count to high, almost every area should have silver and iron.
Yeah.
Which is something I love that they changed. I think even set to high, you sometimes didn't find iron. And now that it's almost guaranteed in every embark, it's much easier to build what the fort you want.
And fluxstone as well. I used to find that even if I searched on fluxstone, I might have a tiny bit of fluxstone tucked in a corner. But I'm finding fluxstone is a lot more prevalent now. So why no preferences on gold or the other stuff? For the search, I want it to offer me as many places as possible so that I can look around and choose between the places. The more conditions you put, the less places it's going to offer you. So gold is nice, but it's not essential. Copper's nice, but it's not essential. I've just put the essential criteria here. I think if Yeah?
Sorry, keep going.
I think if I was going to whittle this down further, I would turn down the savagery so that it's a neutral or calm. And I'd turn down the spirit so that it's neutral or good.
For super new players, you probably don't even need to worry about metals at all.
Yeah.
Since metals are... after you get your dwarves comfortable and learn how to keep them alive, that's when you start playing around with metal. So it's nothing you need to... if you're looking for more places to build and you're worried about it, don't worry about it. As I say in every stream when I'm teaching newbies, don't panic. There's a lot of buttons and things and stuff that seems like you have to remember it. You don't have to remember everything. Just don't panic and know that it's actually rather simple to keep your dwarves alive.
got a volcano here. I was just wondering if that green tile was on top of the volcano, but it's not.
Right. The desire for volcanoes in veteran Dwarf Fortress players. It's like volcano. Ooh.
Yeah, indeed. But I think
So
it's
I
in an
have a
impassable
question
mountain.
here.
Yeah.
Sure.
With the fact that you went through the different civilizations, are you specifically looking to be near to the other sites of your civilization, or does that not really matter and you should be looking more for the type of biome that you want or the amount of trees that you want?
It doesn't matter how close you are to them.
Okay.
If you're on a contiguous continent with them, then the migrants can get to you, the traders can get to you. Yeah. But you have to, like, choosing your original civilization first just makes it easier because you still got you'll have your search result. If you go into choose origin civilization now, I think it removes the search results if I remember right. So we've already got the civilization chosen, and now we can just choose the embark location. And sometimes I'll forget, so I've made that into a habit of doing that first.
That makes sense. Thank you.
So what I would do now, if I'm looking,
Another point,
yeah,
is that you can embark on an island, and your civilization
Yeah.
can still reach you, so you don't need to worry about that.
Oh.
Even on an island where no one else can reach you, but
Yeah.
your civ can.
So you can't get raided on an island?
If there's no one else there, I don't believe so. You don't get anything. You have no contact with anybody but your civilization.
you can still get weird there are certain creatures that can travel underwater because they don't need to
Monsters or-
breathe. Yeah. So if you were to settle on an island that was near a tower, a lot of the necromancer experiments and the zombies, they can just walk through water. So they may well come and set you, come and attack you if they chose to.
Sure.
But yeah, if you embark on an island, you're more likely to have a peaceful run. Just make sure that the island isn't directly in line between two obvious enemies. Like here, this island here is very close to those two towers. So I wouldn't guarantee that that island there is going to be peaceful. This island out here, though, that's probably going to be a really peaceful island because there's nobody's going to, even though there's all those towers up there, they've got no reason to head down in this direction. There's no one for them to come this way. Like down here in the corners, this island here. You're not going to be caught in the path of an army on the march. Because that is something that's quite a common occurrence, is an army that's on the march to somewhere else will stumble across your fortress, and even if they don't attack it then, they've found you. So I had this in one of my recent fortresses where my first summer, so we'd embarked, and within a few weeks of embarking, my fortress was under siege. The siege only lasted a fraction of a second because it was just that an army on the march had clipped the corner of my map. And then the army moved on to wherever they were going. But they came back again, and they came back in year 2. So I had barely got my fortress up and running at that point, and I was sieged for over a year by necromancer experiments because they just happened to stumble across my fortress in the early game. So looking at where, like, we look at all of the greens and look to see both who the neighbours are as listed on here, but who else is in the area, and especially these towers. The necromancers in the towers, they have a tendency to just wander around the countryside looking for trouble. So that site there, and if we double click on it, The tower.
Sinister.
Yeah. this is a really, really difficult embark. It's sinister, so it's evil. You're going to get bad things there. And also
at the top right where it says surroundings, when it's purple, I would highly recommend not embarking there for a newbie or even a medium player because it makes the game extremely difficult.
You go there when you want to have that kind of challenge.
By difficult, I mean raining blood, vomit, pus, fogs. If you've ever seen that episode of The Simpsons that turns you inside out, basically that turns your dwarves into husks that then start eating your other dwarves. Anything that dies under the land will come back to life as a zombie. Even body parts, like you'll chop off a goblin's head and its head will come back to life and start rolling after your dwarves. It's very bad.
Yeah.
Wow. Does that have something to do with the fact that the towers are near, or is that just random?
Yes, it is. So when a tower is established, it starts to corrupt the world, and the terrain around it starts to become evil, and evil spreads. Now, if somebody was to destroy this tower, so this is the tower here. If somebody destroys that tower, the evil in the land can start to shrink back. And as you're generating the world, you can actually watch that happen. You can see the evil spreading and then the evil drawing back again. But this embark, as well as it being in a sinister environment, is also extremely close to a tower. Those necromancer experiments, they will be ranging in an area of this sort of... just hanging out. They're going to be like hanging around in this sort of area here. So you're constantly going to be fighting not just the zombie dead things because it's a sinister environment, but the enemies from the tower. And then there's another tower here, which will also more than likely be hostile to you. What are we... These dwarfs here, they're having a really hard time. There's a dwarven civilization here, and their surroundings have become sinister. So they're having a hard time.
Or a great time.
Yeah, indeed. And the humans are hostile in this area. The goblins are not necessarily hostile. There's a goblin fort up there. Now, a fort is a human settlement, not a goblin settlement. So the goblins have attacked these humans, but because the humans are your enemies, you might actually be at peace with the goblins there. So
is the hostile actually? Is it that the goblins are hostile on that actually because it's to the right of their name?
Oh, was it? Oh, I thought I'd seen that the humans were hostile.
No, that's
Where was I? I've lost it now. Oh, it was there, wasn't it? Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, the humans are hostile. Sorry, the goblins are hostile, not the humans. Yeah, you're right. I've seen it the other way around as well, though.
That's okay, it happens.
Yeah.
Happens to me all the time.
So, finding a peaceful embark, we would be looking for a highlighted green area. We could look for an island. I was scanning around. I didn't see an island that was highlighted green. So it could be that all of the islands have got aquifers.
That's okay. Islands are pretty dull anyway. Sometimes it's fun to throw a monkey wrench into the machine.
Indeed. Yeah, I don't think there's any islands on this world where there's no aquifer, so we'd be looking for something else. I would rule out the very far north because of like how much of the year your rivers are going to be frozen.
Yeah, and that can be a killer if you suddenly... I've had this happen where I run out of booze and suddenly, oh no, the river is frozen.
Yeah.
And then you panic.
So then I would be looking for, where's there a green area that is as far away from a tower as possible?
Yeah, this one's hard because there are a lot of towers.
A lot of towers, indeed. Or if you've got a situation like this where there's a lot of towers, is there a place where the towers are very close to other civilizations, so that you're not their primary target. There's a lot of other dwarfs and things up here, so whereas down here there's a lot of humans.
Yeah, I would go next to the volcano potentially.
Maybe.
I bet there's something there.
Or maybe that one there, because you're surrounded by lots of other dwarfs. So if any of these towers were to come and march in this direction.
I also like how its surroundings are calm. That means it's going to be very nice and calm. No giant animals.
So that's really important, is to look at the surroundings. There's a couple of things that you want to avoid. Anything purple. Avoid any surroundings that are purple. Unless that's what you're looking for. I would also avoid any joyous wilds or untamed wilderness. They are both the high savagery areas. So although it's not evil, it's that's where you get your giant creatures and the giant angry birds and
giant hamsters.
Yep.
Killed my first dwarf.
I just hate it when my civilization of pigs is attacked by those giant angry birds.
So
Angry Birds reference. Never mind.
This place here looked more promising than anywhere else. What we're looking for now is, do we have trees? Are there any trees on this map anywhere? And in this, because we've gone for a 4x4 embark, that means that there's actually 16 individual tiles in this area. So if you look at any one of those tiles, there might not be any trees there. But if you look at another tile, you might see trees on the other tile.
And that was something that always got me too. Because in the old version, it used to just show you one of the biomes that were on your selection. And one of them would say there's no trees, and one of them would say there's a lot. And you would say, oh, I can't embark here, there's no trees. But if you look all around, there are trees in some parts of it.
Have you ever done a half good, half evil, or half calm, half evil?
Several times.
And that can be fun when it was a surprise evil, because it was the other biome.
The original version of the game, you couldn't have two biomes coexist, but now in this modern version, I believe they do, because I did have gnomes getting eaten by giant flying zombie birds in the recent fort. No zombie unicorns yet, though. That's my goal.
The red just signifies occupied spaces,
it
so
does.
Other settlements, whether they're hostile or friendly.
Yeah. They're places you can't build because other people have already built there. So I'm just having a quick look to see what they are. We've got monasteries, no problem. Dwarfs, no problem.
I do like that spot, though. It's calm.
Yeah, it's not bad at all,
It's got
is
vegetation. Vegetation is a good thing for early forts because you don't even need to make your own farms if the vegetation's good enough. You can harvest the surface and have a plethora of food.
So, yeah, I think that would be a good place to go for on this world where we're so full of necromancers. So let's set up our embark in that location there. Oops, make sure that I get it exactly mapped over. Now, you could change the size of your embark at this point if you wanted to. But, yeah, we shall go in that location. Oh, the other good thing about this place is that we've got both elves and humans as neighbours as well. So that means we'll get elven and human traders. The more traders, the better. Gives you more opportunity to buy things and sell things. Is there anything else that we need to pay attention to? Calm surroundings.
I did have one quick question.
Yeah.
Is there a map key anywhere to help remember which icons are which? I'm not sure I understand it, but I'd ask you.
There's no key, but if you hover over things on the map, it will tell you what they are.
Yeah.
So if we hover over like those bumpy looking things, it will show them as
bumpy looking
whatever
things?
you hover over, it will show you like tropical freshwater swamps over there. It's showing you mountain. See that top little descriptor underneath the two names? And if you hover over like the tree areas, you'll see it says like forest, and that's sort of your. It's just you. Whatever you
Right.
hover over, it will show you.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So if you're not
So
sure,
just look at that flavor text up there.
yeah,
Yeah,
indeed.
tropical dry broadleaf forest.
So
Do
if
you see where that is, or is it too small? At the top
Yeah,
right.
no, I see that.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
I'm just checking for questions from the chat.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So yeah, anything you hover over, it'll tell you what it is. That's a human fort. These brown splodges here are goblin pits. The different types of trees have got different indicators. So that's a temperate broadleaf forest. The different biome types have usually got different colours. So down here we've got tropical grasslands. That looks like a desert, is it? Yeah, that's a sand desert.
And then the different settlements are representative of what type of civilization,
Yeah.
right? Is the structure.
So
Like the towers that you showed us.
indeed, all of these little orange dots, they are all human hamlets. So any little orange dots, they'll all be human hamlets.
I
Whereas,
think they're little houses. I think.
yeah, I think so. They look
It's
like
hard for me to see too, but I think that's my guess.
the blue roofs. They're all like the things that look a bit churchy with a blue roof. They're all monasteries. The square-looking things. They're all They're all forts rather than fortresses. This is the things that look properly castle-y. They are human castles, and there's a tomb there. And
I had no
down
idea there
is
was
a
so much
tower.
variety.
Oh, there's a huge variety of things. But yeah, just hovering over, getting an idea of what the different colours mean. I did spot up here when you've got the bright green. The bright green is good areas. So whereas the sort of tan colour are evil areas, the bright green is good areas. Now, good areas...
It used to be purple.
Yeah, the evil areas used to be purple,
Yeah.
but now they're a sort of tan colour. Good doesn't mean peaceful. I think that's worth noting. It just means it's more fantastical. All right, let's set that embark back. Where was it again? It was near the volcano, wasn't it? Down here. Yeah, it was that place there. Okay, let's choose that embark and then we'll have a look at where exactly... So I've got no warnings. If you get a warning pop up, just check. You might have slightly offset your embark location. If it was slightly offset, you might be picking up an aquifer or something. But yeah, we shall confirm. And now I would recommend prepare for the journey carefully. If you press play now, and I would leave you all of the settings here as default as a beginner player, you kind of want the enemies so that you understand how to play.
Yep, that's a good idea.
And you can be really caught out because just because it says that the enemies are off doesn't mean you're not gonna get attacked, because you could well still be attacked by things. Let's prepare for the journey carefully. So I'm going to show my typical setup, and then Zesty, we're going to switch to you, and we're
Sure.
going to have a look at your typical setup.
Sounds good.
So every dwarf has 10 skill points to spend, and for the experienced players, this was a bit of a shock because it used to be that you had to split your points between the skills that you gave your dwarfs and the items that you took on your wagon, but they are split now. Every dwarf has 10 skill points available, and you have a certain amount of completely separate points that are split between the items on your wagon and the animals that you're going to take with you. So what I do is I take as many seeds and foods and drinks as I possibly can, so that I can delay farming and brewing for a little bit. And then, because dwarfs can have a strange mood where they are about to create their one masterpiece work of their entire life, if they have a strange mood, you need to be able to provide them with all of the materials that they need to make their artifact. And that can happen quite early in the game. So I like to take a selection of things which cover all of the usual things that a dwarf might want in the early game's strange moods. So starting at the top, I'm only going to take 3 pigtail cloth, because cloth is something that the dwarfs want for their strange moods, but they also might want silk. So I'm going to take 3 of the cheap silk cloth, and down the bottom there's also yarn cloth. Any of these, so we'll say sheep. I'm going to take 3 sheep wool cloth. So if I get a dwarf in a strange mood and he specifically wants silk, I've got silk, and I don't need to worry about having to acquire the silk. 5 plump helmet spawn is not enough. I turn that up to at least 25. I might increase that further. And pigtail seeds, I'm going to turn that up to 25 as well, because that's going to be our future source of cloth. Cave wheat seeds, I'll leave those as they are. I'll build up those numbers later if I've got spare points. I don't bother with rock nuts, and I don't bother with dimple spawn. Quarry bushes are a little more difficult to process than the other 4 types of alcohols, so all of these will provide us with alcohol, and the plump helmets will also provide us with food. The cave wheat we can turn into flour, takes some extra processing. The sweet pods we can turn into sugar, it takes a bit of extra processing, but all 4 will give us alcohol, and the plump helmets will give us food. So 25 plump helmets, 25 pigtails at a minimum, and then just a few of the others to get us going. I never used to take an anvil if I was going to a peaceful area, but I had a trader turn up that didn't sell anvils. I had to, and because I was expecting an anvil, I didn't order one from the diplomat when the diplomat came. And so if it hadn't have been for the human traders bringing an anvil, I might not have had an anvil for 3 years, which has changed my mind on these things. Now I always take an anvil with me.
Yeah, that can really slow down production in your fort once you're used to it.
And if you get a strange mood as well that requires a metal smithing or something, you're in real trouble.
Yeah, you are. Ooh, yeah.
I only take...
I'm realizing how lucky I was with my 2 strange moods I've had so far.
I only take 1 axe with me, because I only want to use my axe at the start for chopping down trees, and I only want 1 person chopping down trees. And later on I'm going to be making steel axes anyway, so I'm not expecting to get into any fights in this embark. So this is how I would set it up for a peaceful embark, where I wasn't expecting any trouble. And to be honest, if we were attacked by one of the necromancer towers early enough in the game, it's going to kill us no matter how many axes we take with us. But I would increase the number of picks so that we can dig fast. It's my strategy in the early game is to be able to turtle quickly and then build up my strength before I become either aggressive or even defensive.
Turtling is why the game is a lot easier than it may seem at first, because you can actually really just block your dwarves in and you're totally 100% safe.
Yeah. Then
Interesting.
I like to take every type of drink. So far we got rum and ale. I want
I mean, any migrants won't be, but
That's true. Yeah. Wine and beer. And I like to take... Oops, not that many.
as someone in the chat said something great, specialist, as a general rule of thumb, raw materials are cheaper than finished products.
That's true.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
And so some people will take, rather than taking axes and picks, they will take some copper ore and charcoal so that they can make axes and picks when they get there.
Sure.
I never tried that. I should. That's
A little bit of
kinda
work,
smart idea.
but
Yeah.
it saves you the points for other things. Or some.
It was more important when we had to spread the points across the dwarf skills as well, because then you were always scrabbling for every last point. So it's something, I think now you do it for fun rather than doing it because you want to put an extra skill into a particular battling skill, like a combat skill or a particular craft skill or something like that. So I take 31 of each of the alcohols. You can only fit 30 alcohol in a barrel. So taking 31 means that you get a free barrel.
I didn't know that myself. That's a good idea. Good technique. Pro tip from Sal.
Interesting.
And for the same reason, I also take a wide variety of meats. You can do... I like to take at least 30 meats. I'm not going to take pond turtles. Any of the fish take an extra step of processing to be able to cook them. But you could... I like to take 30 meat in total. But I do it in groups of 5. That seems about manageable. But for the sake of speed, this time I'm going to add in 10 of each. Let's go for meat. And I'll look for the cheap meat. Keers. Yeah, we are going to eat keers.
To truly know our foe, we
Yeah.
must consume our foe.
And I'm going to take some chopped mountain goat liver, because why not? I avoid things which sound like vermin. Mosquito brains. Slug eyes, because we know that there are some dwarfs who particularly despise those animals, whereas nobody particularly despises mountain goats. The players particularly despise keers, but the dwarfs don't. Some of them actually like them.
Thank you, Lunatic, for the raid. And also, Andy, thank you for the raid earlier.
Oh, thank you. Bags. It can be quite useful to just have at least one bag, but we certainly wouldn't want them to be a pigtail bag because pigtail bags are expensive. So it just means that you've got somewhere to store the seeds that you're going to be gathering early on. If you've got seeds lying around outside, like if a dwarf has taken a plump helmet to the wagon to go and eat it, or they've eaten some of the wild foods, the seeds will be lying around outside. So having a bag to put the seeds in, I found quite useful.
I also was told by my chat once that bringing certain items that come in bags, like your trick with the barrel, helps
Yeah.
you get extra bags for free too.
Yeah, like you can take bags of sand and then just dump the sand.
Yeah.
These days I tend to just buy one of the bags. Then
Yeah, I tend not to do that much min-maxing.
yeah, but
Pretty
it's
easy
there.
going.
You can do it, and it's not a wrong thing to do. It's
Yep.
it's entirely up to you what you fancy doing.
Yeah, like the Bob Ross thing I mentioned earlier.
Indeed, you do want some thread. I always take at least 3 thread, and that is because you're gonna need. If anyone gets injured, you're gonna need to sew them up. So thread for sutures. Let me just see where that landed on the list. There it is. So I'm going to take 3 thread. Now it's added pigtail thread. Pigtail thread is twice the price of silk thread. So I would remove the pigtail thread. But if I've got spare points, I'll keep 3 pigtail thread, because I can get a loom up and running and do an emergency weaving of pigtail thread if I run out of pigtail cloth for a strange mood. It can be quite handy to have that to hand. And by the same token, yarn thread is pretty cheap. So we'll maybe take 3 of each of the threads, as well as each of the 3 cloths. Cloths are really, really common for strange moods. I only want to take 1 rope. That's in case I need to build a traction bench in a hurry. By the time I'm building a well, I'll be able to make my own ropes or buy a rope. But I want 1 in case I need an emergency traction bed. And I'll make that, I'll buy either a yarn rope or a cave spider silk rope, because they're half the price. Then I don't do hunting. I find hunting to be too dangerous, and it's outdoors. The dwarves don't like it. They're in the rain. They're getting attacked by things. So I don't take quivers with me. I'm not taking any buckets because we're going somewhere that's got wood. We are going to need buckets, but they're easy to make and easy to source the material for. Same with splints, same with crutches. We'll need them for the hospital, but we can make them when we get there. And we can make them in a hurry if we need to as well. I'm not going to spend 50 points on a wheelbarrow and 50 points on a stepladder. We'll make those out of wood when we get there.
And that's a lot of points.
That's a lot of points, yeah. So we've got 700 points left over. I'm going to put those into some animals first. I want to take 2 female dogs so we can breed some dogs. I take 4 male dogs. 3 to be guard dogs for my entrance, and 1 to be a breeding dog that is somewhere safe within the fortress. But if I'm taking 2 males and 2, if I'm taking a male and female just for breeding purposes, like I'm going to with the cats, we want a male cat and a female cat, but there is a small percentage chance that your animals are not going to be interested in breeding. So they can be gay animals or they can be ace animals. Sure. I take 2 of everything. If I've got the points and they're cheap enough, then I'll take 2 male, 2 female.
I never knew that.
And then I'll geld them later. I found that out after I trained some giant tortoises and I was trying to get them to breed. And I was, they were the gigantic tortoises as well, the rare ones that you get in the Joyous Wilds.
Ooh.
And I was really upset because I couldn't get them to breed. And yeah, it turned out that my gigantic giant tortoise male was gay.
Interesting. I imagine that also their age could be randomly generated, and then they could be too old.
They don't get too old to breed, but they do die of old age. So, yeah, it might be that they die too soon. Most animal deaths from old age, and your dwarfs as well, happen the first week of the year. So you don't usually get old age deaths from animals or people in the first year of your fortress, but it can start happening from the first day of spring of year 2.
That might explain why when you start a fort, it skips 2 weeks ahead. Maybe it's to bypass all that.
I take 2 pigs, 2 sows, 2 boars. They can live underground. They don't need to graze. So you've got a source of meat, leather and bones that you can keep underground without having to worry about anything else. Now, if you don't mind like making kitten mittens and puppy biscuits, then you wouldn't need pigs. But me personally as a streamer, and I'm sure you two have found that sometimes chat can get demanding when you start making kitten mittens and puppy biscuits. So if you don't want to make puppy biscuits and kitten mittens, then take in pigs. The pigs will provide you with all the things like the meat and the leather and the bones that dogs and cats would.
Also sounds like you can get cheese, milk from pigs.
You can get cheese and milk, indeed.
I've never been able to butcher cats in my forts. I'm too much of a
Yeah.
squeamish.
I do go and
I don't
geld
know.
the
I
males
feel like
though.
you do what you got to do. Okay?
That's fine. A lot of people can. I just never been able to do it myself.
And then I take some of the birds. I did a lot of maths behind which birds to take. The traditional choice is turkeys. And after doing the maths, I found that turkeys are not actually the best choice. So it's based on the rate at which the bird lays eggs, and those eggs hatch, and how long it takes for the babies to grow up, so that you get the maximum amount of meat. I found that peacocks and guinea cocks, the guinea fowl and the peafowl, are pretty close to each other. The peafowl live longest. They'll live up to, I think it's 12 years. I've switched over to either the peafowl or the guinea fowl, and the peafowl look prettier. So I take 2 males and 6 females, and when I get there, I split them into two. Into 2 groups. I lock a male and 3 females with 3 nest boxes in a room that the dwarves can't enter. So I'll lock the rooms once they're in there and the nest boxes are set up, and that's my breeding flock. And then I'll put down some more nest boxes with a male and 3 females, and I'll put them into a room that the dwarves can access, and then we've got eggs for breakfast.
Interesting. That's a cool way to set it up.
If I've got points spare, and I'm pretty sure that it's definitely going to be peaceful and I don't need to worry about anything attacking me in the short term, I might take a grazing animal. So that a shearable grazing animal. So either sheep, llama, or alpaca. But certainly for this embark, we are quite close to towers. I'm not going to take any additional grazing animals, because anything on the surface, that's points that are going to end up being slaughtered before I've got the opportunity to get them underground in a safe environment. So I think that's the animals I'd take. I might take some extra birds so that I've got more meat, because we've got plenty of points left. So I'm gonna I'll add in a bunch of peacocks. We'll take that up to maybe 10, and they're those extras are to butcher early. It's instead of taking a barrel of meat, I've got meat, bones and leather that are walking in. We can just take those underground and keep them safe pretty early on. With the other points, I would increase my seed count so that I've got 30 of the plump helmets, 30 of the pigtails. Might even take those up higher. Maybe take those up to 50 plump helmets and 50 pigtails, because it'll take a little while before I start processing these. And that way we'll still have seeds to plant before we've started processing the harvest that we've got. And
Having extra seeds is always a good idea.
yeah,
for sure.
indeed. There's no harm in extra seeds, and you're only ever going to run out. And you can always sell them if you end up with too many. So yeah, I'll bump those up to 50. Bump those up to 25. We've still got plenty of points left. We could add in some extra meats Actually, I will bump up the plump helmets. That is instant food that they can eat raw. Maybe even a little bit more than that. We'll take, say, 40 plump helmets. I'll increase the amount of alcohol that we're taking. Oh gosh, hang on. I know what I've forgotten to add in. I was just thinking I've got a lot of extra points here. Other things for strange moods. It's very common it's fairly common for them to want some glass. So I'm going to add 3 raw green glass.
Good idea.
And it's very common for them to want some metal bars.
That's a good idea
That's
too.
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Recently, I ran into a silk issue too with the Fey mood, where they wanted silk, and
Yeah.
the caverns are very dangerous for new players. So maybe bringing a couple sheets of silk might save your butt too.
So I've got 3 sheep's wool cloth and 3 silk cloth and 3 pigtail cloth. So we've got the 3 different types of cloth, and then I've got 3 of each of the different types of thread. I've got some glass and some metal bars. Tell you what else I want to take is some leather. I know we've got leather walking with us on the peacocks, but I'll drop down the plump helmets just a bit so that I can take some leather. Take some cheap leather, some mountain goat leather. Yeah, there we go. It's only 15 points to take 3 leather.
And is that also just in case for strange mood? Or?
Yeah, just for the strange mood. It means I don't have to worry about setting up a butcher and getting some animals butchered, because
While they wait there, losing their minds.
Yeah, it's high. It's very, very common for them to want leather in a strange mood. So it just buys that little bit of extra time, means that I'm not distracted too much. We've got some spare points. Let's just put them into anything. We'll take some extra meat and an extra seed. Because I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking, Zesty, I'd really like to see yours. At this point, I would embark. We'll go over dwarven skills another time. I tell you what I need to do. I need to turn down the... Oh no, I know what I can do. Yeah, continue. I was going to say I need to turn down my music so I don't hear your music as well.
As Cappy Deve in the chat has asked, do you have yarn cloth? Shearing animals is a pain.
I do have yarn cloth as well, yeah.
Yep, they do.
Okay, if I stop sharing my screen with you. And then, Zesty, can you share your screen with me?
Sure.
I'm pretty sure that right after this, I'm going to start a new fort. I have learned so much. It's amazing. There's a lot of beginner mistakes that were made.
I do the same thing. I restart forts all the time, even for the smallest of things. Don't anybody who's listening as well, don't feel bad about restarting forts, because I restart forts over just because I don't like the way it looks sometimes. Like, oh, I don't like the way this mountain looks, I'm going to restart. I did that just the other day, actually. Can you guys see this okay?
Yep, just setting that to full screen. Let me just minimize the... Damn it, how do I minimize this? I was doing this the other day as well with Honey. Well, anyway, yeah, I can see it. Carry on. I'll tinker with it and get the...
So this is actually the world with that fort with kobolds in it. Now, you wanted me to go over the embark, so I'll just choose something really quick here. Nothing too special, but I just wanted to show, like, this is the world. As you see, I usually do a small map. That's just personal preference, because it used to take a really long time to load the years, so I did small, and then I did like 500 years to let the world cook a bit. This one's about 500 years, and I'm just going to pick any old spot. If you're new to the game as well and you've forgotten some stuff, like don't worry about forgetting any of the stuff we've taught you today. It's really wonderful to have, and it will help you have a nice, easier experience. But don't worry, it's not like a test where if you forget one of the answers, you get a D- or something. There'll be maybe a little bit more difficulty, but that's fine. You'll learn for the next fort, and then you'll remember better. So don't panic, my friends. Everything's going to be okay. And I'm just going to embark right on this volcano because why not?
Perfect. We're gonna see some unicorns.
Maybe. It is let's see here, a mirthful area, so that means it's about medium chaos. There's 2 towers nearby. They're both at war. Ooh, this is a terrible place. This is a very good and very evil world, as you can see. All this is good, this is evil. So I would not recommend a world like this for a newbie because this is just asking for trouble. By the way, one thing we didn't cover is there's also an elevation map down here at the bottom right. You can see where your cliffs are, and that can sometimes help you decide how you want your embark to look. But this can be a bit deceptive because it doesn't really give you a really good in-depth look at what you want. So I'm just going to pop it down right there. Light aquifer, that's fine. Light aquifers are cool. So would you like just a very fresh embark, or do you want...
Oh, you show me what you do. How would you set up your start?
Sure. This is what I've recently been doing. I kind of like this setup. I have it as a military start, but I've started using it just for every start because it's worked out so well. And then since I saved, whatever you set in these embarks, you can actually save for future use. And you can also get these embarks. I believe you can even download them, I think, right? And copy them into a folder. So if you like a setup that someone has, you can request it or look it up online and use it for yourself. If you like it. And the items, I usually go pretty fast and loose and pretty easy. I use this embarks for difficult embarks, but it can be nice to have because having a couple of warriors, which is what I have, it's really overpowered almost. How I set it up is I have 2 warriors, and I use this for an evil embark, but now use it for every embark because these 2 guys are going to be training. Like you put them right away into a military at the start and just give them a spot to train. And if they have their equipment, they'll just train constantly for years and become legendary within a year. They'll become hammer lords. And you'll be safe against most threats because those 2 dwarves will crush any foe that comes, most foes. And then I just throw any loose peasants into that squad too.
Oh, you actually take Dimple Cup and Rock Nuts with you?
I have been doing that because just because it's fun to. Sometimes if I get my industry up, it's nice to have the Dimple Cups right away to dye the cloth. But it's a bit of a process for new players. I'd say you probably don't have to even worry about that. I of course have the cloth, the anvil. I think I have 2 copper battle axes because the dwarves use the battle axes for chopping wood. They don't use like hatchets or their hands, so they'll use these to chop wood. So I usually bring 2 just for that, but you don't have to bring 2. I bring silver warhammers for my warriors because that's the cheapest, strongest undead killer. And it's also just generally a good weapon because it doesn't have to worry about sharpness if it's cheap. Then you got your 2 picks, of course, for your 2 miners. I have a full suit of just regular bronze armor, just for my dwarves to wear to keep them a little bit safe from stuff. Like I said, military is a bit more advanced. I usually don't cover military, but this setup has really worked for me to make it nice and easy.
Oh, you've got gypsum powder. I forgot to add gypsum powder onto my embark.
I always forgot it too. Gypsum powder is great because this is too much gypsum powder though because my stockpiles are just jammed with it.
Yeah, I usually take 5 personally. So you need gypsum powder to repair any broken bones.
Yep.
Ooh.
I believe you can
useful.
You can use splints otherwise, but a lot of embarks don't have gypsum in my experience, so I've been bringing it, and it works as a cast, which works better than the splints, I believe, unless I'm misunderstanding it. As for food, it looks like it it didn't have it in this world for some reason. They didn't have whatever prepared animals, so I of course bring a nice assortment of meat because the dwarves like having a little bit of variety. They don't like eating the same thing, so I just throw a couple various forms of meat that I don't feel horrible for, like, and then kitten eyeballs or something like that.
What animals do you take?
I usually tend to just like
Just a couple of
when
cats.
I'm hurting for points, I only bring cats because the cats kill vermin that are eating your food.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have, but cats can be a pain in the butt too.
And then
Dogs
would you
are
just try to buy some later?
Yeah, you
Trade?
can buy animals as well. There's not a huge selection, so as you play and you start developing a play style, you'll sort of figure out which animals you like to play with. I generally just ignore animals. I know dogs are a good idea because you can chain a dog up at the front of your base and it'll detect stuff, but for some reason, I'm squeamish. I'm really squeamish, I have to say. So the thought of chaining a poor dog up to get eaten by a werewolf makes me feel bad for some reason. I don't know. I'm very squeamish, but it's a really good tactic to chain a dog up in front of your fort to catch thieves.
Yeah.
So bringing like dogs is a good idea.
I
What was
don't
that?
chain mine. I just put them in a pasture.
Ooh, good
so
idea.
that they're free to move around.
I like that better. I should really do that.
And then you can just pause the zone and they'll run into your fortress.
Right. Man. All right. I think I'm going to do that from now on. That's a good idea. How I used to pick animals is some of the older version used to have a variety of, I believe, as you even said, guinea cocks. And I always wondered why it was guinea cocks and peacocks. But now, after you've said that, I know why. Eggs are a great source of food, and these animals don't require grazing, so it is a good idea to bring some of those.
Although you
I
need
think I just-
male and female for eggs.
Oh, yeah. I'm just pushing willy-nilly here, sorry. I think I didn't have a lot of points in this one because I brought all this armor. That's the
Yeah.
one trade-off. The armor is very expensive, but it does make you very powerful versus any threats. So I guess it's just another way to do it. But I really liked your setup, Sal. That would be how I would recommend most fresh embarks to go. Actually, how you set it up, and this would be if you want to embark on somewhere a bit more difficult and have stuff to fight. You can bring these guys. But I definitely would recommend yours.
And
over
that's
mine for a new player.
That's the kind of thing that I would go for if I'm going into a dangerous area. Definitely put more points into some armor and some
Protection.
weapons. Yeah. Make sure that I've got at least 2 dwarfs who can fight.
And this has worked so well for me. I even use it on safe embarks just because it's so handy to have 2 hammer lords at all time. I almost never feel like I have to worry. Like goblins show up, and now I just laugh because they walk into my fort totally thinking they're going to take it over, and then my hammer lords come up and teach them different. Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty basic. I didn't bring a lot because of how expensive it is, but Sal's yours is definitely the better way to go for super fresh embark. Did you want me to cover any of the skills too, or?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, for peaceful. How I usually do it, mine's a little foggy because I first learned from Captain Duck's tutorials back in the day, and he usually brought 2 miners, a mason who is always who's also a building designer, which doesn't exist anymore. So I have 2 miners who are maxed out in mining, and then I give them usually one other skill that they can putz around with that's not as important. I think
it's a stone carver rather than a mason these days, isn't it? Mason is like the old architect.
Yeah.
So the mason doesn't make doors and chairs and tables anymore. It's the stone carver.
Yeah, the stone carver, stone crafter. Yeah, here.
Stone crafter's the one that makes your mugs and trinkets. The stone carver is the one that makes. The stone carver is the new mason.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
the
usually how I
mason's the
set it
new
up is I
architect.
have, which is nice. I think actually. How I set it up is based on the most important things. You've got a dwarf based around stone, a dwarf based around so that's the mason with the stone crafting, the stone carving, and of course the masonry. I have a dwarf based around carpentry, and I just give them a couple points in each. You usually have like a total of 10 points to put. so I just scatter it around. Carpentry, you give him carpentry, and I think I also made this one a blacksmith for some reason. You have one settled around farming. I wouldn't recommend blacksmithing until you're a bit more familiar with the game, though. But having a farmer, and I give him usually maxed out in growing and planting. Planting and... It's been a while since I've looked at this list.
Yeah, sure.
Still stuck in the old mode.
Because, of course, the better your planter is, then the more food you're going to get back per seed. Mm-hmm. And when those plants are processed, you're going to get more seeds. So if you plant one seed with a good planter, it doesn't matter who harvests it, you might get 2 plants back from that one seed. And then when those plants are processed, you'll have 2 seeds from those 2 plants. So it's a way to multiply your seeds.
Yeah, which is incredibly useful because I'm always running out of seeds. They go through very fast.
What about a medical dwarf? You don't have a medical dwarf there?
Yeah, I saw that in the chat as well. Now, I had to sacrifice a couple of jobs to make use for these peasants, but the other 2 jobs I usually do, if I'm not using military, is a nerd dwarf. He's going to handle your trade and your managing. I believe that's the...
A negotiator?
Yeah. You want to have negotiation. You also want to have appraisal.
Appraisal, yeah. Anything else I can let them go, but appraisal, make sure that it's...
here it is.
Yeah. So if you've got some appraisal points, then they know the value of stuff.
And that's what I've noticed. The game tends to recommend dwarves for the job of your broker based on a bunch of social skills that don't really apply. But the most important is definitely appraiser and also judge of intent. But appraiser is definitely one of the most important. I kind of wish it would put the dwarves with appraisal at the top, but it doesn't. I don't know why. Something, I guess, for recommendations. But I usually make him an appraiser, judge of intent, an organizer, and a record keeper. And that's my nerd dwarf. He's my manager. He's my broker. He's, I think, the leader usually too. Yeah. Yep. He stays inside all day and works at his desk. And then the other one... Keep going. Yeah.
Oh, just notice that it kind of goes very well to have your broker be your expedition leader and your manager because they tend to be pretty occupied with those roles. And... that it has overlapping skills.
Definitely. That's why. Exactly.
So how does the default loadout tend to compare to what you're recommending? I've noticed I've done only the default preparation, and I've always had, a woodcutter and a fisher dwarf, and I'm like, I feel like it's wrong.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a couple things that are a little bit weird, especially based on your embark.
Yeah.
One last thing I forgot to say before I go on to that is you want to have a diagnostician as well. This will be your medical guy. Diagnostician is the most important, and then throw a couple points into the other skills. Because a diagnostician, if he's a bad one, he'll diagnose the wrong thing and chop off a leg or something when he should be suturing it or something.
Yeah, the default embark gives you things like you take a wheelbarrow, but you only take 5 plump helmet seeds.
Yeah.
Which to me seems the wrong balance. Not that there is a right or a wrong, but that to me is not ideal. I've yet to find a circumstance where that's a good setup.
Right, especially items that you can make so easily so early on feels like a waste of points.
Yeah.
I was just going to look at the embark thing that you were talking about.
Sure.
So we could take a look. And then just wait.
If you press prepare for the journey carefully, it shows you what the defaults are. It doesn't allocate the skill points, but it shows you the default items. It throws in some more stuff as well, but...
yeah, I always definitely up this to a much higher amount.
Yeah.
You definitely don't want just 5. You'd run out so fast. Oh, not pigtails, really. Pigtails are important for later, though. But for a fresh fort, you don't need to worry about that. The dwarves can be naked for a while. They'll be mad, but they won't die. And that's why I tell people not to panic. Your dwarves, the dwarves need very little to survive. They'll be pissed, but they'll survive.
Mm.
And you'll get more
They're
dwarves if they
sturdy.
die.
Well, anyway, we are reaching the end of our slot tonight. So, yeah, I think we should call it here for now.
Yeah.
I want to thank Zesty and Elana for joining me. It's been
Thank
an
you for having us.
absolute
It was a
pleasure.
pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
And
Yeah, I really enjoyed this.
I hope you'll both join me sometime again in the future.
Definitely.
Oh,
And
yeah,
I'll
I'd
be
love to.
watching the future streams as well for more education.
Right, what
Yeah,
I'm
and
gonna...
playing along with folks as they're playing the game is a really great way to learn too for folks who are in the
Yeah.
chat. If you want to try that.
What I'm going to do is find somebody else who is playing Dwarf Fortress, and we shall go and raid them.